Listen, I want to show you a list of senators, Republican senators, who are the keys to watch now. Some of them can be won over, like Ron Johnson, all right? You know, he's already suggested he could. What do you think is most important about the people on the screen now?
Well, that is the group. And let's take a look at a whiteboard that shows why they're hanging in the balance. You mentioned Ron Johnson. His concern is he wants to pass what are called pass-through small businesses that file on the individual tax rate. He wants them to have a tax rate that's equivalent to the 20% corporate income tax, and that's very expensive to do. Oh. But that's what he's holding out for.
Wow. Okay.
Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski concerned about including the repeal of the individual mandate from Obamacare, which they're concerned about what that does to the health care market. On the other hand, repealing the individual mandate, in essence, adds a bunch of money to cover the deficit because the government doesn't have to put out subsidies for the people who elect not to buy insurance. But there are two members concerned about that. The deficit impact. You had a number of people up there who are concerned about this, most notably Jeff Flake and Bob Corker, and they're concerned about two things. They're concerned about the size of the deficit. They don't think that it's $1.5 trillion. They think that there's pro-growth policies that are going to trim some of that deficit. But the question is how much. And then the question of gimmicks. There are 20-some-odd provisions in this law that are counted as, quote, temporary, that nobody thinks really are going to be temporary. And all of the fact that they're, quote, temporary means that they can offset some of that deficit. So how they resolve those is going to be an individual discussion with the members. Finally, child tax credit. Earlier today, Marco Rubio was on. The question of how big is that tax credit? The Senate's is larger than the House, but still not as large as Rubio wants. And then he wants it to be refundable. That means that it goes to people who, it's a tax credit that goes to people who don't owe any tax. So in essence, it's a transfer payment, a welfare payment, if you will, a support for a poor family that doesn't pay any income taxes.
Very interesting.
And that's what all of these issues are tied up with. And if you move the dial on one of them, it affects the amount of money that is available for doing other things. I mean, it's a very complicated deal, and you're going to have good faith to get it resolved.
But one thing I'm not hearing from you or anybody else is cut spending. And you can get around a lot of this debate by cutting spending. You can get a lot more room in the tax bill if you cut spending. Now, Steve,
except that you can't do that in a revenue measure. You have to do that in the appropriations measures. That's why I think Speaker Paul Ryan was so right to say when they passed the bill, this is part of the answer. The other part of the answer is for us to get really determined to rein in future spending. Now, it doesn't mean that we need to cut from where we are today. It simply means that rather than spending this much in the future, we spend this much in the future in order to keep the delta of our deficit from growing dramatically.
Steve Mnuchin was with us on Friday. He was with Chris Wallace on Sunday when he said the following. Treasury Secretary here.
This is technical issues in the Senate, and the corporate side is about jobs. This is the Tax Cut and Jobs bill. This is about making America businesses competitive so we can bring jobs back home and trillions of dollars invested here in the U.S.
I think he's right about that. I hope he's right about that. But my query on Friday was how come these CEOs in America running these big companies aren't on TV every day saying, or in the Wall Street Journal saying this is great because it'll help my company, in turn it'll help you. I don't hear that voice. The other thing Mnuchin will not do, he won't dodge a question like so many. He is willing to say some Americans will pay more in taxes. And that's something, frankly, I did not think I would hear from a Republican administration in Congress and in the White House. Go.
Well, let's take each one of those. First, yes, we need to get this done because this is about growing the economy. CEOs are loath to inject themselves into a partisan debate like this. But earlier, you were talking about this with Sandra. Goldman Sachs says it's going to be a great year in 2018. Their assumption was the tax reform, the tax cut is going to get passed. So I talked to individual business leaders, and I've been traveling the country the last couple of months talking to some of them. They believe that this will be very good for their bottom line, that this will allow them to increase wages, allow them to invest more in plants and equipment in the United States, and make our economy stronger. The second one,
I'd just like to hear from them more often, quickly.
Well, yeah, I would too, but they're not going to get involved in a partisan political debate like this is where Republicans are going to, no Democrat is going to vote for this unless their vote isn't needed.
Last point, quickly.
Well, look, this thing needs to get done, and the Republicans understand that, and it needs to get done for the purpose of growing the economy. And it is not just technical issues; these are big questions. But I believe they're ultimately going to get resolved because Republicans understand the stakes for the country and the stakes for themselves.